Bugattis in their finest, and a lot of them too.
Yeah, I think we have 16 Bugattis entered this weekend. Well, we've had as many as 30 entered on one of the West Coast events that we had, but yeah, this is a beautiful, historic, what a contrast. We had the Trans Am contemporary cars out here earlier, and now we have cars. There's a couple of Bugattis, one that dates back to 1913, another that dates back to 1922. Most of these are in the mid-30s.
What I love when we get close up, and Tony Garcia, our cameraman, doing a great job, you start to see how motor racing developed and how cars developed. I mean, I'm looking at the chains on the outside. I'm looking at parts of the leather to get in and out. I'm looking at the dials. And you really are watching a stunning history of how the motor car and the race car came to be.
Yeah, Ettore Bugatti, the cars were known for their advanced engineering in the road-going cars, and of course they had great success in Grand Prix, early Grand Prix racing. In fact, they won the first Monaco Grand Prix back in 1929, I believe it was. But these advanced engineering, you'll hear us talk about supercharging. That was back in the 1930s. Bugatti had that. He wasn't a big fan of it, but decided he had to go that way with Grand Prix racing. You'll also hear about all aluminum engines. You'll hear about lower center of gravity. I mean, he really had advanced engineering in these cars, and the 1922 car out there actually has Ettore Bugatti's signature on the engine.
Wow. Here's the sort of technology I'm talking about. Look at the chains used to effectively pull the brakes.
Yeah, he was not a fan of hydraulics, so those cables were actually used to pull the brakes. To stop the car. Can you imagine being in a Grand Prix race and having to pull that to stop the car?
Well, can you also imagine watching it snap?
Yes.
Also, early day mirrors. Yes. I remember it was, Ray Haroon at the first 500, yes. Or the first winning 500 that used mirrors, and that was a bit of an anomaly.
And the engines in these cars are stunning. We have a 3.3 liter single overhead camshaft, which was an Ettore Bugatti engineering design. Again, a lot of these things you hear us talk about are now in modern racing cars, or when racing cars that were developed way after the 1930s.
Beautiful sounds as well.
And the only two Le Mans series wins that they had back in 1935 and 1937, and the Bugatti was wonderful advanced engineering. And these cars were very fast as well. Some of these engines produced like 260 horsepower, 290 horsepower. They even have a 3.3 liter, 2.3 liter, 1.6 liter. I mean, can you imagine being back in the 1920s, 1930s and having a car like this?
What I love is, I was reading up on Bugatti last night, and of course the color blue for France, but interestingly enough, Volkswagen in more recent times took over the Bugatti name and managed to, basically bring it back to prominence with some kind of one-off cars, but to have that special name and carry it on and also replicate, they built a factory not far from where these were originally built, and so, somebody definitely had an eye to keep the history going.
Right. Yeah, unfortunately, after the passing of his son in a testing accident, John, and then when Ettore passed away, there wasn't a successor. So this company actually started as an airplane parts manufacturer.
Yep.
They were going to try and get the airplanes for World War I. That didn't work out, so he went into racing. But when the company went into financial difficulty, it was actually purchased for its airplane parts manufacturing. Then when you said the Volkswagen took it over, I believe that was the Chiron that they came out with. That was actually named after the driver back in the Bugatti days that had won more and been on more podiums than any other driver. And the Veyron, which was the most recent Bugatti, that was actually named for the driver that won in Le Mans. And they're getting rolling off the grid there. Again, these cars are historic. They're beautiful to watch. I was fascinated the first time that I saw them go around the track here at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, I went back to the paddock, and there's some 20-plus cars. There's just one, maybe two left in the paddock, and I was asking the two guys looking after them, what the problem was, and they said, well, we've got a few things. We're just saving them till tomorrow. They're going to get another on tomorrow, and we'll have all of them out there. That's an amazing feat when you, like you say, you consider that some of these cars go back to 2013. Excuse me, 1913.
Yeah, I was going to say, looking here, I think that's a little more modern than I have down. Yeah, the 1930s were their heyday, so to speak. They actually were kind of the forerunners of the Grand Prix championship winners of the modern day.
Yeah.
But I'm just fascinated by the engineering prowess that Bugatti had. When they had a lighter engine, they have to make the car lighter. So what did they do? They drilled holes in the chassis just to be sure that the car would make weight, because they changed the regulations in Formula One at their time. But just to have the forethought to say, okay, we have a little bit lighter engine. If we put it a little bit lower in the chassis, that will lower the center of gravity. To me, it's just fascinating that, you know, back in the day that they would think of those things and be that far advanced to you know, have that as part of their design. Yeah, the number 57, that is a 1937 Type 57 Bugatti out there. Also have a 1933 Type 59. That was the last of the production race cars for the Bugatti. They had a couple of specialized cars, but that was the actual last production. And you'll notice sometimes when we kind of go back in the histories, the earlier cars, it'll say the number that were built. And then as they went on a little bit, the cars became such classics and everybody wanted them, so you hear us saying produced. Also have a 1935 Type 35 out there, 1927 Type 37, 1925 Type 30. Have the Type 22 out there. That is the one that has the engine that was actually signed by Ettore Bugatti. And as these cars became more and more popular, of course, more and more people wanted them. So some of the earlier models had somewhere between maybe 400 and 500 built. And then as you get into the production, it's more like about maybe 1,000 or so built. But all these are very rare and very classic cars. A lot of them from far away. They have several drivers that are from California, several from Arizona. And I believe we're coming up towards Franklin Road Apparel Turn 11 here, John.
Yes, and here we go to the start of this race, and hats off. I was at the Monaco Historique, as you mentioned, where Bugatti won the first ever Grand Prix there, and I don't think there was this many Bugattis at that event this year, so hats off to the organizers here in the United States, because that's quite a feat when you consider all of these were made in Europe, and they really have got the total history of motor racing here at Watkins Glen.
Yeah, they won Le Mans 24 Hours twice, as we mentioned. They won the Targa Florio 5 consecutive years, and as the engine...
Which I find amazing when you think about it.
Yes, and it's a Targa Florio over the streets, a rally over, was it several thousand miles?
7,000 miles, yeah, that's ridiculous.
And
now, look at that, you've got a bent wheel, or under braking, the wheel really buckled. Pulling those levers, as we mentioned. But actually, they're hustling them, aren't they?
Oh, yes. They actually race these cars. I mean, this is just like, you know, the Sports Car Vintage Racing Association. They are actually racing these cars. They're throwing them around, and these cars, they don't have, you know, rack and pinion steering. They don't have the very precise steering. Kind of have to, well, I want to turn there, I better start here. That's their type steering.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh, this truly is a wonderful look at these wonderful cars. We've got a nice little race on here between the 14.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to try and work at 37, I think it is.
37, I believe that is a Bugatti Type 37. Just trying to find that particular car. 14 is a Bugatti Type 59. This was the last production race car for Bugatti. It was built for the 1934 Formula One season. It used the Type 54 chassis with the engine. This is the one we were talking about. This was placed a little bit lower for center of gravity, and this is the one that has the holes drilled in the chassis just to be sure that it was going to make weight, because they had changed the regulations in Formula One.
There's the 32, 1931 Type 51. Charles Camille Jones at the wheel of that one. And there's your number 14. That's a 1967. Excuse me, not 67, what am I saying? That's the wrong list. That's Charles McCabe, excuse me, in the 1932 T59. As we take a look at the number 11, that's Nathaniel Green and a T35 Bugatti. That light blue. About the only thing modern are the helmets and the fire suits.
It was a Type 35 and a Type 35C. 50 of the Type 35C were built. They basically used the same body, but one had a 128 horsepower. That was the 35C, and it was the 1928 and 1930 French Grand Prix winner. They raced at Pau and also raced at Gertrude. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correct.
We say Pau.
Being so close to Canada.
Well, you got to say Pau.
Pau, okay,
yeah,
right.
Pau. And I wonder, because Pau became famous as a street circuit, and I wonder whether it always was. It became, it became a famous street circuit for Formula 3, but maybe back in the day they actually ran it on the roads back then.
I believe you mentioned the number 11. That is a Type 35. It was produced in 1925, and this is the most successful of the Bugatti models. And listen to this, John. It won over 1,000 races in its time. I don't even know if we have any cars today that could withstand 1,000 races, let alone win 1,000.
Yeah, I don't know many NASCARs that have done
No.
1,000 races, let alone one of these great vintage cars.
Included in those 1,000 races was the 1926 Grand Prix Championship, and this is the car that won the Targa Florio one of the 5 years, which was from 1925 to 1929 that it won the Targa Florio. 96 of these were built, has a 90 horsepower 3-valve, 2-liter overhead cam, straight 8 engine. Now, some of this engineering you can't even find today, let alone back in that day. This is what fascinates me about these Bugattis, is the engineering and the engine prowess that are in them.
Now, the factory of the Bugatti company was actually founded in 1909 in the city of Molsheim in Alsace. So it was effectively originally a German manufacturer,
right.
and then that's why perhaps Volkswagen felt the need to kind of bring it back.
Well, the actual original factory was actually bombed during the
Yes,
World
right.
War II, and it was rebuilt, and they actually started producing the modern-day Bugattis in a factory near Molsheim. And that was the Alsace, what is now known as the France.
Yep.
And it was funny because it was in Germany, it was in the Alsace region of France, but he was from Italy.
Yeah, Alsace-Lorraine, as it was known.
And Bugatti, unlike a lot of designers of the time, Bugatti designed these cars, but he actually had a hand in developing and actually building or producing these cars. And not a lot of designers were doing that at the time. They were designing cars possibly, but not actually having a hand in the actual cars themselves. And he always loved motor racing, and something that is true today, and something was true in the historic Trans Am days, that he was building these cars for road going, yes, but he was using racing as a basis for his engineering. He was using a basis for his development and to sell those road going cars. But one of the famous road going cars is the Royale RP41, and it looks almost as big as some of the stretch limousines that you'll see on the street today.
Wow.
And had about as many luxurious appointments inside that Bugatti as you find in the stretch limousines these days.
Yeah, you were quite right. It was 1929, the Monaco Grand Prix, that Bugatti came to fame, effectively as a racing machine.
Right. And that's what they were known for. They were known for their engineering. They were known for their luxury, the road going. These cars had coil leaf springs. Again, in the 1920s and 30s, I just find this absolutely fascinating that these cars actually had a suspension. We did a race earlier this year where we had the Ford Model T.
Yep.
Ford Model T was basically a body on something that when you went over a bump, you felt all of it. These actually had suspensions to them.
Wow. So McCabe, Baker and Green, your top three at the moment. And yeah, what you were saying about the two Le Mans wins, the one in 39, it was Pierre Viron who won. And then therefore that's where the Viron name comes in modern days Bugatti, right?
Yes, it is. And the other one, which I'm going to let you pronounce it because you do a much more better job of that. That was the driver that had been on the podium more times than any other Bugatti driver. And they named that car the modern Chiron, I'm going to say, in honor of him.
Pierre Viron. Right.
See, I told you, say much better than I
There you go. Well, when you're born in England and you're so close to France, you've got to get these things right, you see. And as you well know, as earlier in the day, Ben alluded to, we could almost say that there's a bit of a celebration of Queen Elizabeth's era.
Yes.
She was too, born in 1926, and over the years was a keen motor racing fan, and watched it all the time, often went to Aintree and many other races, and yes, she was a keen follower of this, so part of our celebration of her wonderful life, perhaps on display here today.
And we were watching the qualifying session on Thursday when these cars were out there during testing, and then they had their qualifying, and you're going to find remarkable that these times were in the 2-minute to 2:20 range. And again, that is quite fascinating by the cars. But again, these engines, they're 1.4 liters, 2.3, 3.3 being the Grand Prix racing engines that they used. But they were engineered so well that the weight was distributed well. Again, something that you find a lot in racing. The only thing that they didn't like was the cable pulling on the brakes. And hydraulics were back in the day, but he just did not subscribe to them.
Well, you know, back in the 30s, Ettore Bugatti also got involved in the creation of racer aeroplanes.
Yes.
And so these bigger engines that you're talking about were obviously made steady and fast and also reliable from use of airplane engines. And of course, in the early days of motor racing, manufacturing and technology from engines often came from the airplane.
The number 3, that is the 1913. I think that is the oldest car that we have out there on track at the moment. That is the Type 22. It was introduced in 1910 with 435 of them built. It was the first Evolution and first Bugatti to have a 4-cylinder valve head engine in it. Again, can you imagine, this is 1913, and you already have 4-cylinder valves. He went from there to single overhead valves, and of course he was the person that came up with the overhead camshaft.
Yeah, and you talk about you know, their attention to detail and design. They were hand scraped to ensure that the surfaces were flat and that the gaskets were not required for sealing. It's pretty impressive.
Number 33 was just being shown on screen there, Jonathan. That's the 1927 Type 37. Only 290 of these were produced, and you notice now that we've gone from built, where they were actually hand built, to produced because they've become so popular. That has a 1.5 liter engine. That was the normal engine that was in it, or a supercharged. That was the Type 37A, which was the racing model, and the Type 35 had a chassis relying on its lightweight development. And again, you know, for racing, you look for where you can save weight savings wherever you can, because that, you know, less weight equals more speed. And the ways that he did this is rather remarkable too. Again, the engineering that are in these cars is just magnificent, and you need to come over here and take a look at these cars, fans, if you've not already seen them.
Yeah, and we should take our hat off to that design, because so much of what followed afterwards was sort of in line of keeping style, keeping design, and he was miles away. I mean, Bugatti were ahead of their time in many ways in making, you know, he described the Bentleys that were around at the same time as fast lorries. So he was all about making it stylish, typical Italian, typical French, making it both, you know, competitive but also stylish.
Yeah. And if you look at the road-going cars, obviously these that are out here now were the racing versions of the road-going cars. But if you look at the road-going cars, they are absolutely elegant.
Yeah.
You know, they are definitely works of art. And they had so many things that, you know, again, going back to the Model T, that was the basic transportation. These, you stepped in there and you knew you were in luxury. And that's what he wanted people to feel, was get in that car, feel like it's just not, you know, you're driving to wherever. It's an experience to drive there, and you'll be happy to get there because you are just in such a well-made and well-built and well-engineered car.
Well, we're on the final lap here, coming up to the loop and the boot, as they call it, and it's still Baker McCabe and green as it has been throughout this race, and it looks like the number 32 of Baker will take the checkered flag. They'll be out again tomorrow. So if you enjoyed this, let your friends know on our chat, and speedtour.tv. Tune in again, because they'll put on a show once again and put on a great race. Look at them sliding through there. Beautiful.
Another thing, when you were talking about them coming through the loop. These had mesh gearboxes, not synchro mesh, but mesh gearboxes. Again, fascinating engineering, fascinating racing development in these cars.
We'll get a close finish, that's for sure. McCabe caught him up. Gap of 1 second. It's less than that now as they come out of the last corner to finish this wonderful Bugatti race. All Bugattis involved. And
look at this finish.
Yeah, it's a pretty darn close finish. There you go. But it is Baker that takes it.
Just barely.
Yeah, just barely.
And McCabe kept him honest those last couple of turns there. Coming out of WeatherTech turn 9, he suddenly caught him, and he almost was able to get by him, but not quite.
So who would make the tires for these cars, I wonder? Good question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I know Bugatti like to keep everything in-house, so but obviously the tires would have to be imported from somewhere, but I'm not sure where.
Mm-hmm. Well, what a joy. Motor racing started here in 1948, but these cars even ellipse that, and that's pretty impressive. Well, he's got his spare. And that's what that leather is you see there. Most of them don't carry the spare, obviously. For now, it's a sort of an effect, but they've still got the leather where the spare tire would go. And I'm sure back in the day, you needed that spare tire just in case.
Yeah, it wasn't like you could call somebody to come get you and fix that tire, huh?
No.
Now I know that when we were what was it that we were doing the Ford Model Ts and what have you? Was that out in California?
Yes, probably. Yeah. Yes.
And
yes, I think so.
And I believe that for some reason, I have no idea how you did this, but somebody actually let you on one of those cars where you were a spotter or
yes,
whatever.
exactly.
So
yeah.
Maybe you could get a ride in one of those Bugattis there.
I would happily take one. I tell you, I love the Ragtime boys that did that in California, and that's a great show if you ever get a chance to watch the Ragtime races. They're called. Look them up on the internet. And yeah, they put on a wonderful show. Well, that concludes our Bugatti race. They'll be back out again tomorrow, and we'll take a short break here from the land of the Finger Lakes. Join us at Watkins Glen in a moment.
Performance is a dirty fuel system. It can cause decreased fuel economy and actually do harm to your engine over time. By adding Lucas fuel treatment to your vehicle, it cleans and lubricates the entire fuel system. Pump, carburetors, fuel injectors, and valves as you drive. It also improves your vehicle's performance. It's a non-solvent product designed to protect both gasoline and diesel engines. Lucas fuel treatment. It works.